Thank you very much for joining again. To all of you in the group, my name is Arent van Spijker. I'll be taking you on a 1-hour tour of corporate innovation management, effective corporate innovation management. I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to myself. I am the founder of the Continuous Innovation Framework, and I've done so from the perspective of my role at Blinklane Consulting, an advisory firm in Amsterdam. We are together with Gladwell Academy, for which I am a trainer. We are a group of about 100 professionals trying to help organizations become more adaptable. And we do so by introducing agile ways of working and a process called continuous innovation. I'm the author of 2 books. My first book, The New Oil, was about using innovative business models to turn data into profit. So how corporate organizations can leverage data and the value of data in new products and services, but also in new ways of assessing customer value. And my second book is just out at the beginning of this year. It's called Continuous Innovation, and it is about enabling a process of effective corporate innovation management in organizations. And it stresses the importance of innovation and why innovation in this day and age in particular is increasingly important, and how it is becoming a core competence. And then obviously how successful organizations can apply a process of continuous innovation. And that will be the focus of this presentation. So feel free to ask your questions in the chat. With me is Floris Bos from Gladwell Academy, who is helping me out in the chat and keeping us all aligned. Obviously, at the end of this presentation, you will receive an email with a link to the recording. But there is also always an opportunity for you to ask questions and get in touch with us through info@continuousinnovation.com or to the generic Gladwell Academy email address. Because Gladwell Academy is a partner of the Coin Innovation Framework, the training partner of the Coin Framework. So the people at Gladwell Academy will be able to answer all of the questions that you may have later. So let's start off. And basically what we want to start off with is the problem itself is that in today's market, change is a constant. And that change is actually increasing at the pace of the impact that it has. And I want to start off by giving you an example of 3M. Now, if you're into Agile, you know for sure 3M, because they're the company that invented the sticky notes, which we all use in our daily lives. Even though at COVID, we don't do it as often as we did, but sticky notes are the well-known. They were invented by 3M, and people think that that is primarily the product of 3M, but it's not. Actually, 3M is a company with a 55,000 product portfolio. Their products range from tapes, masking tapes, finishes, basically anything that sticks or glues, but also that is a masking tape. They serve the professional market and the consumer market. And in 2017, it was the CEO of 3M, Anders Tulin, mentioned that 30% of 3M's revenue, that is about $5 billion US at the time, 30% of 3M's revenue was generated by products that did not exist 5 years before. And he mentioned that the challenge of his company is not so much in managing that portfolio, but managing the fact that the percentage of products that have a lifespan of less than 5 years is increasing and the time is actually decreasing. So by 2020, it is expected that around 45% of 3M's revenue is generated by products that did not exist 5 years ago, and that the market volume of those products is increasing. So the financial amount of that. And that means that this company, in effect, has to launch 10,000 new products per year. That in itself is an amazing feat. But think of it, that these 10,000 products are also 10,000 products that we probably don't know as types of products, or at least an enormous amount of that, or a large percentage of that. So it's not that we understand already that we have 10,000 ideas of what we would like to launch. We even have to get the ideas. We have to test them out in practice, see if they work, and then launch them. So that is central to most organizations today. And maybe 3M, with 10,000 new products launched every year, is a scary example, or is an impressive example, but it is similar to what all organizations are experiencing today. Now, I've published this little graph a couple of years ago to senior leadership in an organization, and I thought it was, too basic to make any impression, but it tends to stick with people as a clarification of what the impact of innovation is in your business. So if in year one you spend roughly 10 to 15% of your budget on innovation, and in this case it's roughly 10% of what you see, then the next year that will be some kind of revenue in scale up. So basically your innovations will not create a steady flow of revenue within 12 months, but within 18 to 24 months, they will actually take part of your volume, and they will become your scale up products, and they will go at the expense of business as usual, and you need to accommodate for new innovation as well. So after year three, some of that innovation will have become a large part of your new business as usual. So you have about 3 years before an innovation turns into a significant part of your business as usual. And contrary to what people mostly believe, is that innovation does not come on top of your existing business, but it starts to replace your existing business. And the faster that goes, and given the example of 3M that we saw, that speed is increasing. The faster that goes, the faster we need to say goodbye to our traditional business as usual, and we need to revamp our organization, and we need to revamp our knowledge and experience. We need to revamp our architecture, our technology base in our company, perhaps the partnerships that we have, and definitely the processes that we have. Especially given the fact, since these innovations do not fit very well in the organization that we are today. Think of this as digitization and a change of new digital technology, which is making a big impact. And every year we start the same cycle. So basically, organizations are in need of a process of continuous innovation, which is not continuous invention of new products. It is continuous innovation of our organization as a whole. And it means that we need to balance our long-term options against our efficiency target. And it's real interesting to understand that when we look at organizations today, when we look at corporate management, not just corporate innovation management, when we look at corporate management, all of the attention of corporate management goes out to making this part as efficient as possible. We spend huge amounts of time on making our current business more effective and more efficient. But we should have a serious look at trying to design our future organization that will accommodate for all of these businesses again. And it's not or, it is and. We need to be efficient in what we do today and what creates most of the revenue, but we also need to be very effective in making our organization adaptable for the innovations that are coming up. So the primary goal for corporate innovation management is not so much to invent, but it is to revamp the organization by introducing new products and services, and make sure that we don't just pay attention to the innovations that we have, but also to the organizational accommodation of those innovations. Now, that makes continuous innovation a core competency, and it's obvious that most CEOs are already aware of that. What they do not understand, or what the problems are that they're facing, is that they really don't know how to manage that process, how to manage that core competency, and that's where continuous innovation as a process comes in. So 64% of CEOs says that innovation is as important as operational effectiveness. So luckily, 64% of CEOs already understand that they need to balance the long-term options against the efficiency target. But what they need is a process that will accommodate that. And that is a process that will capture innovative ideas from internal and external sources, but also assess the feasibility and the value for the organizations as fast as possible. We cannot just be tinkering around with our innovations. We need to find out very quickly whether the idea that we have works or not. And the reason why is not that we don't want to overspend on accommodating for this particular idea. We don't want to waste resources. We certainly don't want to waste resources, but the biggest problem is that the resources that we spend on ideas that will not work could also be spent on figuring out other innovative ideas and whether or not they have value. So it's not just a waste of money from a waste perspective, but it also takes up our time and our attention and our resources that we cannot spend on innovations that would add value. So we try to capture innovative ideas as fast as possible, and then we assess their feasibility and value for the organization as fast as possible, because if they're not valuable, we might spend our attention on other innovations. And then the third point, we need to align our business operations to adopt the innovations very effectively in our existing organization, but not just, push them into the mold of who we are today, but change the organization to accommodate for the innovation. And then on top of that, we need to manage the entire portfolio for innovations to create the maximum bang for our buck, the maximum value that we can have, but not the maximum value for the organization that we are today, but the maximum value for the future. And we can only do that by aligning innovation with business strategy, and the other way around. We need to align our strategy to the results of the innovation that we have. So if you look at the key success factors driving corporate innovation, actually, this is what most CEOs that are successful in innovation or that run innovative organizations will have to say. So 57% of all the CEOs in highly innovative companies will say that the most important factor for successful innovation culture is having the right culture to foster and support innovation. And that means having a safe environment to innovate for both innovators, but also for management. Because if we tell management on the one hand to be effective and efficient and have the lowest possible cost for the highest possible revenue in our business as usual, that goes right against our objective to spend time and energy on innovation, which is not at all clear how much result it will give, where it's not at all clear whether it will be successful or not. So it's not just that we want to have a safe environment for the innovators, we also want to have a safe environment for the managers that become inefficient because of innovation. It means providing instant support and budget for great ideas. Don't let people linger on. Don't let people be in doubt whether or not they can do this. Don't give them too little money. Don't overinvest, but also don't give them enough money and enough support and enough attention to try out their ideas. And make sure you focused on fast results. Don't make your existing organization a process bottleneck. And first and foremost, be transparent about the process. Be transparent about what is success. Be transparent about what you're trying to achieve. Be transparent about your failures and what you've learned and how you can take them on to learn from your failures to make the next big innovations work. And provide company-wide open access to knowledge and experience. Another 44% of CEOs says that the second key factor to the success of innovation is strong visionary business leadership, which means that business leadership needs to be directly involved and show that they are committed. Innovation is not just fun because it's cool work. When you get to work on the latest technologies and on some really bright and exciting ideas. Innovation is, 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration, and business leadership needs to be part of that and support that perspiration by direct representation of senior management throughout the process, but also by providing people with a vision that guides them, and active support. Set transparent value goals, help people out and where to focus, and challenge them directly on where they can obtain success. So that support is also backed by adequate financial and operational resources. So don't just applaud. If you're in senior leadership, don't just applaud creative ideas, but actually back them with finance, and back them, more importantly than finance, back them with availability of people. And don't halfway during the process pull out the people because you think you have, something in the running business, something in the business as usual that sounds more important than your innovation. The last factor in success is the 37% of all CEOs will say, well, the third biggest success factor is the willingness to challenge norms and take risks. So allow and encourage people to take ownership of the innovation. Get people to go out there and figure it out and leave them be. Provide support, provide financial backing, but also don't mess around too much in their process. And encourage them to take ownership. It's not so much that we want to leave people to themselves, but we want them to take ownership of their innovation and drive it. And I'll show you in a minute that the key success factor to the continuous innovation framework is ownership, and how we create ownership in an innovator and then bring ownership to the organization. But at least we should allow anyone to start an innovation without questions and with support. So another driving factor is that people that have a good idea should be allowed to pursue that idea and make sure that they start to find out whether or not that idea has value for the company. And if you provide a standard process for that, people will actually go out and do it. One of the biggest obstructing factors to innovation is that people don't know how to start. They have creative ideas, but they don't know how to start. And there is a nice anecdote from my own experience. When I was a guest at one of the innovation presentation schemas at a large telecoms firm, there were individual people from the organization, ordinary employees that have regular day jobs that had innovative ideas. They were given funds to pursue their idea. And then after a while, present them to senior management. And one person came up and said, I work in the department that does installations of television connections in people's homes. And now our mechanics, they have 3 to 4 different ways in which they can connect a cable coming into the house to a set-top box for television. And he said, we take between 5 and 7 cables to connect, from the wall to the set-top box of the television set. And he had invented a single cable that could make all these 7 connections. And he took about 180,000 pounds. This was in the UK. He took about 180,000 pounds to develop that cable and produce it in stock. He had not spent that much, but it would take 180,000 pounds to start developing that cable, start building it. And he made a few prototypes, tried them out, and they worked really well. And it would save the company per year 1.9 million pounds UK. Obviously, senior management was ecstatic. They said, you've done a wonderful thing. You went out into the homes and the houses of people. You've had your experience. You figured this one out, and you can, with a little investment, save us tenfold per year through this innovation. And one of the managers said, how long have you had this idea? And he said, 19 years. And the company for 19 years had not been able to encourage this person to take ownership and allow him to start the innovation without questions and with support. They didn't allow him to take risk. They didn't allow him to fail and get back up on his feet and try again. And they didn't give him a can-do mentality. They just said, it's a nice idea, but our engineers in the product development department will actually come up with this. And they didn't listen to him, even though he had tried before. And now in this innovation program, he'd been allowed the time, allowed the ownership, and allowed the initiative to do this. And he succeeded. So having the right culture to foster and support innovation and support that culture through strong visionary business leadership, and then allow everybody to challenge the norms and take risk. That sounds very easy. And probably some of you in this webinar will now say, I've heard that before. That's what everybody says on innovation. It's having the right culture and vision. But how do we do that? Well, this is actually the tricky part. So effective corporate innovation management is not about knowing and understanding this. It is about putting this to practice and managing it as a single process. And that's why I came up with the continuous innovation framework. Now, I'm going to spend some time in explaining to you what this is. But in essence, what you're looking at is a picture that is available online. If you go to continuousinnovation.net, you will see this schema, and you can click on each of the icons in the schema, and you will get an explanation. You will get an explanation of what we mean by that icon. I'm going to explain to you very simply what it is. It is a process model. It says exactly what will happen in sequence. You start on the left, you move to the right, and it is explaining who will actually run that process. Now, the trick in this game is that we've tried to create something that doesn't allow you or doesn't require any organization to hire anybody new, because innovation happens inside the organization. Sure, we have some or innovation departments and innovation specialists that might handle the innovations that are far out and really high tech. So typically they're called Horizon 3 or Horizon 2 innovations. High tech, not very applicable yet. It's more research and development than it is, innovating the processes and the products and the services that we have in the short term. But there is a vast array of innovations. Probably 70% of everything that happens in innovation is trying to improve our current business, which is typically called Horizon 1, close to home, very close to the business that we run today, and Horizon 2, which is slightly farther out, requires a change of process, or requires a change of architecture in a change in the way that we work. But that kind of innovation sort of consumes about 70% of all of our resources and budget that goes to innovation. And the COIN continuous innovation framework is aimed at those 70%. And you don't need new people or innovation specialists for that. They come in handy, but there is a vast untapped resource in your existing organization. So what you'll see is that the people driving this have a particular area of expertise. We call them the innovation coaches, and the rest of the people are in your existing organization. Now, the framework is a process model for these people. So these people we call roles. They have roles, not functions. They're not jobs, full-time jobs. They are roles of people. And the tasks they perform are rituals. They're everyday activities or weekly activities or 6 weekly activities that they perform. And they can perform them next to their existing business. Remember, the 10% innovation on top of the organization, in the innovation and scale up, they're done and performed by the existing organization, because if we want the existing organization to change and accommodate to the new innovations, we don't need to build a new organization next to it. We need to start changing the organization that we are today. Now, let me explain to you what we mean by this model. There are 3 layers first and foremost. The bottom layer is the innovation level. It is the process that every single idea moves through, from innovation through a process into embedding in the organization. We call the stages ideation, validation, experimentation, scale up, and embedding. It's probably nothing new to you, because this is quite frequently mentioned in all sorts of innovation theories. The second layer is at the portfolio level. It is the group of all of the innovations that we are running at the same time in the organization, and how we manage that for the most value until we get a process of continuous improvement. And the third layer is the strategy layer, or the organizational level. It's where we take corporate strategy, strategic drivers for innovation, we translate them to value goals. We mentioned lean budgeting, and it's where we connect to the existing business owners and where we drive organizational change. Now, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that a person in the organization has a bright idea. We call this person the innovator. And we do that because we want this person to take ownership of the idea and take ownership of the innovation and start driving it to the creation of value. That person will assemble an innovation team, 5 people, maybe 6, maybe 4, and they'll be working on this idea and validate it very quickly on paper using something like the lean canvas or the business model canvas that you know from Alexander Osterwalder, and validate very quickly whether the idea makes any sense. But as we do that, we start also collecting the assumptions that we make. So it's easy to have a great idea, and it's easy to design the hockey stick profits that you'll make with that idea, but they're all based on the assumptions that you have about how you can make your idea successful. So we start collecting the biggest assumptions that we're making that need to be true in order for this innovation to have success. And we take the biggest fail factor that we know from Eric Ries in his book, The Lean Startup, and we apply a switch. And a switch is a 6-week innovation challenge. It's basically the concept of getting these 5 people to work on the innovation for 1 day a week for 6 weeks, and then prove that the biggest assumption that we have, the biggest fail factor that we may have, is either true or false. And obviously we're hoping that it's false, because if the assumption is we prove the assumption. Now, if the assumption is that we can actually technically build something, we're going to prove that we can build it. And we're going to take 3 out of the 6 weeks to build something and then immediately bring it to a live working environment. It's not the full production environment. It's not the full set of customers that we have, but we take it out of our company into the real world and see if it works. Not on the test banks, not in our labs, but really out to clients. So we build a first version, a mock-up of the app, or we build a trial version of our product, and we see if it works. It doesn't have to look nice. It doesn't have to be production ready. It's not an MVP yet, but we try and see if we can get it to work. And we prove the value in that. Or if we already have a product and we're not sure whether customers will buy it, we'll take it to some customers and ask them, would you buy it? What do you think? Would you like it? The importance is that in 6 weeks, 1 day a week, these people who are normally working other jobs in the company, they get time off for 1 day a week for 6 weeks to try that out. And the innovator will lead them as the owner of the thing. And the team will take ownership of that particular idea and move it into the switch. After 6 weeks, they pitch that idea to the Continuous Innovation Board, which is a representation of senior management. The important thing is, this is not about people that are high up in the hierarchy. The important thing is that the Continuous Innovation Board is a group of people that have the mandate to tell these people that they can take 1 day a week. So they are probably the boss of these people, or the manager of the manager, if you will, because dogs have bosses, but people nowadays have managers. So the innovation team gets assigned time to do this by people high up in the organization that can actually say, it's worthwhile. We believe it's worthwhile that you spend your time on this. Now, after the switch, the team pitches in pitch week, which is actually for each team only a 15-minute pitch. And they pitch their idea to the Continuous Innovation Board, and they get 7 minutes to pitch. And they pitch, what was our idea? What is the long-term vision for our idea? What do we do in this switch? What were the results, and why do we think we should continue for the next switch? And then there is 8 minutes of questions. So there is 15 minutes per idea. And in these 8 minutes, the Continuous Innovation Board will say yes or no to spending another 6 weeks, 1 day a week by this team. And then again, after 6 weeks, they do a pitch, and the board will say, we think it's really valuable what you're doing. Let's spend some more time and perhaps even some more money. And they'll do another pitch. And in 18 weeks, the team will have proven product market fit. They don't have to scale it, but they need to prove that there is enough value in this idea in order for the company to invest more structural capacity. And that's what happens in the scale-up phase. In the scale-up phase, actually, we start transferring ownership from the innovation team. So the dark blue is ownership by the business, and the light blue is ownership by the innovator and the innovation team. And gradually, not at one go, but gradually, ownership will transfer into the organization. Obviously, business owners have targets set to the business as usual efficiency, like I showed you before in the graph. But the interesting thing is, if they start messing around with the innovation, the efficiency of that running the business will go down, because they will spend time and energy on something that's not complete, that's not already generating revenue, that might actually require new investments. So one of the people from the CIB, one of the senior leadership in the Continuous Innovation Board, will become the ambassador of the idea and work with the business owner to scale up and grow the innovation into a success. And they do so using innovation metrics. So first we'll have growth targets, then we'll have scale targets, and only then do we have revenue targets. So there, in this button, Innovation Metrics, if you go to continuousinnovation.net, in this Innovation Metrics section, you will find how you can set targets for the consecutive stages that the innovation scale-up goes by. And at the end, we'll have a period where we are adopting the organization to accommodate for the innovation by changing the architecture, by creating new competencies and retraining people, by perhaps changing our processes, by adding partnerships, etc. So we're accommodating the existing organization to the innovation and not the innovation to the existing organization. And that's how we get continuous change. Now, obviously, we need to take into account a few things in this model. Um, in the invitation to this webinar, it said that I would discuss three particular things. One is portfolio management. How do you manage a portfolio of such innovations? And then strategic alignment, linking this innovation part to corporate strategy, and then creating the culture in which you can do this. Well, the framework accommodates for all three of those. So getting one idea to go from the head of an innovator, which could be anyone in the organization, describing the idea, validating it, moving through the 6-week innovation challenges, pitching to the senior management, and then scaling it up in a very structured fashion and accommodating it to accommodating the innovation to land in the organization. That is the process of a single innovation. That is what most organizations can actually do. And if you read the popular innovation literature, if you go into value proposition design by Osterwalder, into Eric Ries's Lean Startup, and many of the other books that you've read, this is actually the basic way of doing it. The trick actually starts to exist when you try to make this a frequent and concurrent process. Now I'm getting a question from Mainout saying, during switch 1, we test the most riskiest assumptions. Can you specify the approach for switch 2 and 3? Well, sure, yes. Actually, there is one risky assumption, Mainout, that we test, which is the biggest fail factor. But when you've proven the biggest fail factor, we go back to the drawing board and we reassess now what is the biggest fail factor after we've learned this one. So basically what happens in switch 2 is we move over to the second biggest fail factor, which at that point has become the biggest fail factor. And we take the learnings from this switch and we feed it back into the validation, probably in the canvas, but we go back to the validation that we did. And then we look at, are we still on track with what we thought we did? So we feed back the information that we've learned here into the validation schema and then find out what is now the biggest fail factor. And we go back and forth. Actually, in the switch, in the 6-week innovation challenge, the switch is a very structured process in which we have a kickoff and we have a build phase and a measure phase and a learn phase, just as we learned from Eric Ries. And in the learn phase is exactly where we try to assess what we have learned, what that means for our validation, and what the next biggest fail factor is. Now, usually after 3 switches, we find that we have product market fit. If we didn't, then we can continue to a 4th switch, a 5th switch. Actually, what happens is that when in scaling up, we keep adopting the 6-week innovation challenge rhythm. So we still keep into 6-week cadences. Sometimes they gradually go back to 4-week cadences or even 2-week sprints, depending on the product. At this point, this is also where we move away from the innovation team and into the existing organizational build architecture. So probably the scaled agile framework or other agile methodologies and development teams that you might have. But in the first 3 switches, we keep proving the biggest fail factor. So let's have a look then at portfolio management, because this is all very interesting for a single innovation. But what if you have not just one, but what if, like a client that I work for, if you come up to me and say, we have 1,000 good ideas. That was actually an insurance company that I work for now and implementing the continuous innovation framework. And at first they told me, we have 1,000 bright ideas. And I went, yeah, sure. Show me the Excel spreadsheet. And I was expecting maybe to see, between 50 and 100. And then metaphorically speaking, they thought it was a lot. So let's call it 1,000. But it turns out that there were actually 997 ideas on the spreadsheet. And this happens. Companies have bright ideas and they actually take time to collect the ideas because they don't want to lose out on anything. How do you quickly validate 1,000 ideas? And then if you have them running, how do you manage that process? Basically what happens is that this whole process gets coached by an innovation coach, because the innovator by himself or by herself is probably not able to take a little bit of distance from this process. So if you have this running, it would be good to have at least one innovation coach managing that process. Now that innovation coach can also have a look at this portfolio of ideas and then very quickly decide, together with the continuous innovation board, where do we want to focus on? what are actually the key topics that we would like to extend our innovation efforts the first. And then we use a system that we call weighted fastest innovation first. Now, any one of you working in Agile will immediately say, that sounds ridiculously like weighted shortest job first in Agile. Well, you're right. It was adapted from that. But weighted shortest job first doesn't work very well for innovation. So we've adapted the process to weighted fastest innovation first. But basically what it means is that we pick out those innovations that add, at least in theory or by our assumptions, that add the quickest and add the most value to the value goals that we set. What would we like to achieve with innovation in our organization? An organization that requires organizations to set targets. We would like to become more digital. We would like to be more in a particular market. We would like to become bigger in a particular product area, or we would like to find out what blockchain can mean for us. In fact, I worked with an oil and gas company, and they at one point said, anything goes in our portfolio, but 50% of our portfolio should contribute to our hydrogen product line. Well, that's a value goal. That's a very clear strategic statement. And then the portfolio, in choosing the ideas, might actually say, okay, we need 50% of all of the ideas of all of the switches that are going on. 50% of the switches should have an idea, should be working on an idea that has to do with hydrogen. Now, in this particular case, the company didn't have enough ideas to make 50% of their ideas in hydrogen, so they set out to do idea generation and get more hydrogen ideas, innovate more, and they could do hackathons, they could do makeathons, they could partner with companies and did challenges for startup companies to become more involved with hydrogen startups or hydrogen-oriented startups. And they manage their portfolio for value. They also said, if we take 1 day a week from a group of 5 people per switch, we can do a maximum of 15 switches in our organization concurrently, because we don't want to spend more capacity than that. So imagine 15 ideas all having 5 people working 1 day a week. That means that you have 15 times 30 man days a week, so 30 man days per switch. That means that you can have, up to, quick calculation, 450 man days per 6 weeks on innovation. And you can do very quick calculations on what the maximum capacity is that you have, and then manage which innovations you want to pursue because you think they are the most valuable. Also, because you understand that for each switch that you do, you allow you take into account that switch might have a second switch and a third switch and a fourth switch. You can manage the inflow of new ideas into your portfolio. And you might also say, well, we have some stuff coming up that seems much more valuable than the stuff that we're working on now. You can decide to stop here and pursue something else that has more value. So in portfolio management, the innovation coach, which is driving the process of continuous innovation, can work together with the continuous innovation board to very quickly determine what ideas are we going to work on, what are the subjects, and how many ideas can we have. And that is effective portfolio management. Also, if you extend that into growth areas, we can still decide whether to pursue or not a growing or a scale up, because if it doesn't grow fast enough, we might kill it at the benefit of some other ideas coming into the portfolio. Now, the immediate link between innovation and strategy is already there, because what we said is that if you want to do effective portfolio management, you need value goals from the organization, and the value goals should be derived directly from the strategic goals of the organization. Most managers will have big questions on how do we do that? How do we link our strategic initiatives to innovation? Because basically we provide money and resources on innovation to whatever idea comes up. And they actually believe that the first person that comes to the market with the innovation should get some budget to try it out, but it's not that way. We can have a very structured process by serious validation and and very distinct portfolio management, we can determine exactly how much capacity we're willing to spend on that innovation. And then innovation becomes predictable, because after a few years, typically after 2 to 3 years, you can start measuring the value that comes out at the end of this funnel by measuring the value add from products and services that you have innovated, or the cost saved by renewing your processes, for instance. And you can really look at how much money did we invest and what result is coming out. So you make it measurable. And because you chop it up into 6-week blocks, you can actually also measure very well what the capacity is that you spend on innovation. And then it becomes possible to say, okay, if we have the influx of ideas here in order, we can actually look at what our strategic goals are, strategic objectives for the organization, and we can translate those into value goals. Now, strategic drivers might be the strategic themes that already exist in your organization, but they can also be innovation-driven strategic drivers. So the development of blockchain technology is a very good example. It wasn't there before. It's coming up in the last 5 years. Maybe we need to find out what that means for us. But also themes like forward integration of services in our markets, or faster digitization of processes with our competitors. They might be strategic drivers for your company. And the Continuous Innovation Board, the same people that mandate the capacity at this level, the Continuous Innovation Board decides on the strategic drivers and translates them into very concrete value goals. So if these have an 18 to 24 month scope, the value goals probably have a 6 to 9 month scope. And on that 6 to 9 month scope, we might actually change the focus of our portfolio over time. It doesn't go as fast as all of the innovations, but by changing the value goals every 9 months, every 6 to 9 months, we can gradually change the influx of ideas and the subject of the ideas that enter in our portfolio. Then we also have a third instrument. We can manage the budget to the number or to the size of the innovation that comes in. So we can actually decide that, for instance, for one particular type of innovation, we might allow more budget per switch, or even a larger innovation team per switch, or more switches per thing, before we want to find out the answers. And the third one is that when we have done this, the fourth idea is when we have decided on the strategic drivers and the value goals, it becomes much easier for us to explain to business owners what we want from them in the context of the corporate strategy, and why we don't just want them to focus on operational efficiency in their lines of business, but also spend time on renewing their business and taking some risks. This is exactly why we have the CIB ambassador as a senior leader, negotiating with the business owners where the financial results of their departments and their business lines are, given the efficiency of the running business and the innovation efforts that they have. And then innovation doesn't work against the business owners, but it works in favor of the business owners, because it becomes part of their goals. And when innovation becomes part of the goals of the business owners, it becomes much easier to set the goals here from strategy. So again, the continuous innovation framework is a blueprint for a process, but it's a process that fits neatly into the immediate environment of the organization. Basically, the only new function that you have is the innovation coach. Now, I know that some of you in the webinar, some of you that are listening right now, are actually the innovation leaders in your organization. And probably you are in innovation departments, or in innovation labs, or in innovation spearheads. And you are the people actually driving the innovation projects here. And this is not a challenge to what you are doing currently, because you are probably some of the most valuable people in the world. But you have this vast resource of colleagues in your organization that can work with you. So if you are currently in the innovation lead and you manage some of these projects, try and get some of the people in your organization as innovators and get them to run the projects from the perspective of their own business, and start coaching them. And you do some of the projects on your own, but you also start managing this portfolio, and you can open up this vast resource in your own organization. And then you have much more leverage with your management team to say, okay, let's do a structured link to the strategy and manage exactly the resources that we get by coaching the individual employees to create the improvements in their own organization. So running through this is exactly how we create the culture of continuous innovation, because that culture doesn't come from a process. The culture comes from people. Basically, the best way to describe the word culture, it is the way in which people behave, and the set of values that we have on what we think is normal. Now, at first, when you introduce the continuous innovation framework in your organization, the process is new, but it gives you a good grip, a good a firm understanding of who needs to do what when, because all of these processes, the switch and the pitch and the evaluation and the portfolio management sessions and the strategy sessions, they're all pre-programmed. We know exactly when they happen in time and who should be there. And if you do that, we know between 6 and 9 months of doing this and having done a number of switches and having done a number of pitch weeks and having organized an innovation day, the company, and especially the continuous innovation board, the senior management, starts to understand where the value is in this. And it becomes a cadence in which the organization works. And if you have people with the right mindset in a regular cadence, within 9 to 12 months, that will create the culture of continuous innovation. All of the clients, literally all of the clients where we've implemented this, have told me, I would not go back, not for €1,000,000. This process is predictable, it's transparent, it's very clear in where it adds value. If it stops adding value, we stop doing the innovation, and still we don't harm people in stopping innovations, because they understand that, and it's very transparent, that it didn't prove enough value in order to continue, but everybody's always free to come up with new ideas. And because we have these people working in sync and they work along a predictable cadence, that creates a culture. So what does that lead to? That leads to very sustained creation of tangible value. Innovation gets out of the realm of, it might happen, let's just try. It becomes a real tangible process with value and ROI. And it delivers 20 to 40% faster time to market for innovations. It creates 20 to 50% less waste in innovation spending. I think actually in the short term, the biggest result that the continuous innovation framework will have in the organization is just killing everything that is not going to add value and you should have known. And because it's a predictable process and cadence, people will also understand why. So it creates higher employee engagement, not just any higher, 30 to 50% measured higher engagement, because it's a safe environment. Actually, remember the insurance company that we did? The very first team that went on a switch, after 2 switches, decided to pull back. So they advised in pitch number 2, they advised the continuous innovation board to stop investing in their project, because they said, we found out that it's not working, but we have a third idea, we have a second idea that we really would like to work on, but let us stop on this and move on to something else. And they got new funding and new time and capacity for switch number 1 for their other idea. So you get faster time to market, less waste in innovation spending, and a much higher employee engagement, not just from the innovators, but also, or maybe even in practice, in particular, from the continuous innovation board and senior management. So what is the continuous innovation framework? Well, basically it's open content. If you go to continuousinnovation.net, you will find this framework. It's a website. Like I said, every icon you click on, you get a detailed explanation of how that process step works and how you should implement it. But it's not just that, it is training and certification. What we've done is we've created an open body of knowledge that is accessible to everyone. You don't have to sign up. You don't need to leave your email address. It's just, it's there for you to use. But if you want to become proficient, and I would advise you, if you want to have this done in your own organization, go get trained at Gladwell Academy and get certified. Because when you get certified, you become part of the community. And you become part of the community of certified professionals, but there is also an open community, which is on the LinkedIn pages. And as soon as COVID-19 passes and we all get vaccinated, we'll start doing the meetups again that we did before. So we used to do bi-monthly meetings in cities around the world. We're going to do that as soon as COVID-19 will allow us again to do that. But until then, make sure that you get trained and certified as an innovation coach or as an innovation leader. So basically, there are 3 trainings that are available through Gladwell Academy at this point. The first training is called Innovation Essentials. It's a 2-day training for innovators and teams, and it explains the basics of the continuous innovation framework and how you manage that innovation through. The second training is particularly aimed at innovation coaches and innovation leaders, and it teaches a little bit more on how to coach teams and what the intricacies are in getting teams to perform all of these switches in good sync. And it is the right certification level for becoming an innovation coach in this process. And the third training that we have is called Innovation Strategy, which is immediately aimed at senior leadership and managers who need to be part of the Continuous Innovation Board. All of these trainings are available through Gladwell Academy. If you go to gladwellacademy.com, in the open enrollment trainings, you will find a chapter that says COIN trainings, and you'll find these trainings there. Juan or Juanjo has the question in the chat. How does open innovation and the creation of new innovation ecosystems with external parties, startups, universities fit in this framework? That's a very good question, Juan. Let me go back to the framework. So basically what you said and what I explained is that this process manages the internal process of ideas that come from within your organization. Now, if you look at innovation with external parties, we found out in practice that basically they follow the same route, but the team is not comprised just of people from your own organization. But if you start managing switches with a team that is a combination of an external supplier and the internal innovation team, it achieves 2 things. First is create speed like nothing else, because you're not asking a third party to develop something and then evaluate that from within your own organization, but you're forced to really team up and become one and stick to this very fast-paced cadence of the 6-week innovation challenge. Same goes with startups. Startups usually already work in this way, although we're currently running an accelerator program for startups in the province of Overijssel. We're taking 10 companies in one go, and they're all doing switches every 6 weeks, and even startups can benefit from this idea because they don't necessarily work the lean startup. Not every startup is a lean startup, believe me. And so working with startups, especially if you're a corporate, can actually force both the people in your own organization and in the startup to work in this very structured cadence. And you get feedback from your continuous innovation board on whether or not you're delivering value. Same goes for universities and external parties. The one thing that is slightly different is if you have high investment, high risk innovations. So remember the oil and gas company that I mentioned, they were building a new factory and it was a highly innovative project. They were building a hydrogen factory. Obviously, building a factory is not done in 6-week iterations. It takes €1 million investment up front. It takes high risk. They did take ideas from the switch, let's not do the whole factory design, let's do proofs of concept, but that was not really different from how they would have done it even without this way. So some multi-million-dollar investment, long-term, building high-risk things maybe don't work in this way. Some other, corporate acquisitions of startups to see if they can develop in their own ecosystem before an integration does not fit very well in the continuous innovation framework. Or strategic investments in Horizon 2 and late Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 from the perspective of corporates is not so much done for continuous innovation framework or doesn't add well. But any short cycle development of new products and services or process improvements, we know from experience, it's very well doable to get external parties into the same cadence. External parties, startups and universities. So the accelerator program I discussed was with startups and universities together. And in almost all of the companies that we've implemented continuous innovation framework, the corporate teams were working together with third-party suppliers, that had an interesting technology or sensor-based stuff or AI expertise. And at first they were a bit reluctant to join the switch cadence, because they said, you know what, just give us an assignment and we'll finish the work and we'll deliver it back to you on time. But once they got into the role of getting a combined team of the startup or the external party and the corporate people and join them in this cadence, they wouldn't do without. So hopefully that answered your question, Juanjo.